All right, so I will get started with the 2021-22 Establishment Grant. This grant is something that we've offered for quite a few years now. You will be seeing that there's a bit of changes. I am Danny Robertson-Boersma. I'm the Programs and Peer Review Manager at SHRF, and I'm also the Program Manager for this Establishment Grant. So I'll be the person you contact if you have any questions, or as you're working through your application and things come up, and I'll be happy to help you out. So just to go over what I'm going to discuss today, and everything will be recorded, and after the recording is updated and Nikki's done all the things she needs to do, our engagement specialist at SHRF, she will send this recording out for everyone. So yeah, I'm going to talk about SHRF a little bit, just in case you don't know who we are. Then I'll go over the program overview. I'm going to highlight what's new, because there are a couple different things specifically when it comes to eligibility. Then we'll discuss important dates, grant funding. I'll go more into the eligibility application process, the review process, and then finish off with tips and questions. Feel free to use the Q&A box though at any time during my presentation, and I will answer the question, or if I know that a slide is coming up, I'll just probably save it until we get to that part of the presentation. So Saskatchewan Health Research Foundation, we work to fund, support, and promote the impact of health research that matters to Saskatchewan. Like I said, we've been around for many years now, and we're happy to say we've been able to fund some great research through our different programs. And recently, SHRF has gone through a couple of different changes, from strategy to we did a funding refresh, and we even decided to update our research management system, because why not do that all in the last 2 years? So health research is vital to the improved health of Saskatchewan citizens through a high-performing health ecosystem with a robust culture of research and innovation. And SHRF is vital to enabling the best health research that supports Saskatchewan solutions to Saskatchewan health challenges by upholding a rigorous peer review process, measuring and sharing the impact of funded research, and collaborating with partners who can help maximize the impact of this work. So this is what we do on a day-to-day basis and what we work towards when we are funding grants and offering programs. So for this program, the scope of health research, it's a broad scope. We can do anything from basic to applied. You could be doing clinical, health systems and policy, biomedical, or population health research. And the nice thing is too with this grant, because it is working on establishing yourself as a researcher in the province, and that you can maybe be doing basic research within population health, or maybe you're going towards more of that applied biomedical into the clinical. That is the flexible component of the establishment grant, is we're here to help you move forward in your research. So the purpose of the establishment grant is to assist early career researchers in Saskatchewan in establishing an independent program of health research in the province and achieving the research productivity necessary for obtaining major funding from national and other external agencies. That should actually, there wasn't a change here, I'll update that later, but we are saying instead of independent autonomous program of health research. So just a little bit of a wording change if you're wanting to know, that is in the program guide. So something that is new starts with that purpose. Previously, this grant was for anyone that was new or newly resident in the province. After reviewing our program from the last couple of years and just looking at our strategy and the way that we are going, the establishment grant is now just for new career, early career researchers. We'll discuss that a bit more in depth when I get to the eligibility component, but just so that you're aware of that change since last year and previous competitions, this is now for early career researchers, so within the last 5 years. As I've mentioned before, and you may or may not be aware, SHRF decided to update their RMS system. We are still using the same platform, working with Smart Simple. What we've done though is just over the years, that system's been around for 7 or 8 years now, and the back end stuff you guys weren't seeing was just starting to not work as well as it should. And we wanted to make sure that we wouldn't have any issues going forward so that you guys didn't have problems later on. So if you haven't checked out our new system, please do. You can get there from our website at shrf.ca, and you'll be able to see that we've updated the homepage. Instead of seeing a bunch of list views right at the start, you'll get to see it's more icons, and we've cleaned things up, and we're hoping that that'll make your lives easier, though it may be a bit of a learning curve if you were used to our old system, specifically when it came to application, because now we have a bit of a different way for the applying, but I think once we all get used to it and those little bugs are all fixed, we'll be good to go. And then also we've updated our SHRF funding guide. So we took a look at all of our programs and our original awards guide, so our overarching guide of our programs, and just identified where we were having similar information in all programs. We decided that would be better suited in the funding guide. And this will now help, and it's important that you read this alongside the establishment program guide, because it'll give you information just about all of the policies we have that overarch for each, for all programs at SHRF. So those are the three major updates, the what's news. The important things, something to highlight, write down, put it in your calendar, whatever you do that reminds you. So we launched this competition on Tuesday. And as you know, this is the information webinar. There is an eligibility check cutoff. So the last possible date that you can submit your eligibility to this program is January 21st. Please note that you can work on this now and you can submit at any time. It's a rolling intake. So if you did have time right now, I would suggest going in there and getting your idea in, getting that eligibility information in, and then I will review that in usually 3 to 5 business days unless things are busy, but I'll get to that as quick as possible, and I'll let you know if I have any questions, or if everything looks good to go, I'll push you forward into the full application. So the sooner you get eligibility in, the sooner you get to go to your full application to work on it. So after that eligibility check cutoff, I will probably, if I have questions, send that back to you. And then you have up until January 29th to get those revisions in. If you get those revisions in before, you do have that added bonus that if I still see something isn't just right, or I have more questions, I'll be able to send that back. And we can do that back and forth up till January 29th, where a final decision will be made on your eligibility. So once you've gone through eligibility, the next important date is March 11th, which is the application deadline. As you can see, our deadline times is always 4:30 p.m., not end of day like midnight or anything like that. So just make sure that you've got that marked in your calendar. It's 4:30 on March 11th is when you can submit your full application. For this program, we have a CV update deadline. This is only for the principal investigator. So for all other CVs that maybe your co-applicants are submitting with you, they will not be able to put in a updated CV. But because this is an establishment grant focusing on yourself, we're making sure that you have up until May 14th to submit any updates you may have. And that can be either if you want to just send us if a journal was accepted or was in the final process, you could just send us that email, or you can send us a full CV update, updated CV, sorry. Finally, last couple dates is the funding decision. So the results will go out June 17th. If there were any kind of delays, hopefully not. We were able to get everything out this year in the middle of a pandemic. So I'm hoping with this new program that there wouldn't be any issues, but that would be June 17th. But we'll let you know if there's anything that comes up and results may be delayed. And then those who are successful in the competition will be able to have a funding start date of the first of the month between July and October. And we would work with you on when that would start. One other important thing, something to always remember, and maybe find this out now if you are interested in applying so you can plan appropriately, is if there are internal deadlines for your institution, those can take some time, and you just want to make sure that you're not, close to the end and you weren't able to work through that, because you will need the institutional signatures for this. So just a high level, the amount of the grant is each application may request up to $120,000, and it can be for a maximum of 3 years. That doesn't mean, that does mean though that you could maybe only need $100,000 for your grant and it's only going to be 2 years. That's perfectly fine. We're just giving you those maximum amounts. So just a couple go-to guides and just some information that'll help you as you work through this is make sure you have the most recent application package. So that would be the one that was published on Tuesday. It's on our website. You can find it under funding opportunities. You can also, if you go straight into the RMS and on your homepage, click on funding opportunities and then open the establishment one, you will see that you can download the application guide from there as well. Then there's also the funding guide, which was formerly the awards guide. Like I said, that's been recently updated, and I strongly suggest that you take a look at that just so you have a general idea of the overarching policies. With the new RMS, we made sure to update our RMS manual, so that has some helpful screenshots and step-by-steps on everything from creating a new profile to if you need to update your password, or when it comes to when you get into the application, things such as inviting someone to your application, completing a different parts of the application, everything like that. So hopefully we've covered everything, but if you see something that's missing, we're happy to add that in too. And then just a couple of things on our website. The opportunities page is obviously a good place to go because that's where the high level establishment information is. We do have a resources page, so that's where you may find a couple of things that you might need for this application. And then finally, we have our YouTube channel, which has how-tos. So that's if you're not big on looking at the images or reading instructions, we've tried to cover, I believe, pretty much everything that's in the RMS manual is also on our how-to videos. So for this grant, you do need to be affiliated with a Memorandum of Understanding institution, so an MOU. So right now we have 6 different MOUs with institutions. There's the University of Regina, the University of Saskatchewan, Sask Polytechnic, St. Thomas More, Saskatchewan Health Authority, and Parkland College. So you'll want to make sure that you're affiliated with one of these institutions that can hold the funds. I'm just going to answer, good question, Lindsay. Can you clarify if it is a total of 120 over the length of the proposed project or up to 120 per year for a maximum of 3 years? Good question. It is 120 over the length of the proposed project. So if you did want to go for an example for your AFF would be if you requested 120 and you were going to do 3 years, you would have up to 40,000 for each year. Obviously that changes depending on what your budget looks like. So apologies for not clarifying that at the beginning, but thank you for that question. So on top of making sure that you are with a institution with an MOU with SHRF, there are some other principal applicant eligibility. You can have one application per principal applicant that clearly demonstrates that you are the principal applicant. So you can't open up more than one application. And what we're doing, because this is an establishment grant, we do allow that you can have other individuals added to your grant, but you'll need to demonstrate to the review committee that you are the person doing the majority of the work as you are establishing your career. You must be an independent researcher. You have to be holding or have a commitment to hold a position at an institution with an MOU. So that means if your position hasn't started yet, but it will be starting, say, October, we would just need to have information in your application and we can work together, showing the review committee that you don't hold that position right now, but you will have it by the time you can start your grant. You must be within the first 5 years of initial faculty appointment as of July 1st in the application year. So that would be as of July 1st, 2021. This is that change that I was talking about when it comes to eligibility. So we'll be counting back from 5 years, up to 5 years from your initial faculty appointment in Saskatchewan, because it's an early career focus now. That does mean that if there are some individuals that may have from our old eligibility requirements had no longer been eligible because you had been at that 3-year mark, This now does extend it, so you can apply if you're still within your first 5 years and fit within the eligibility requirements. Again, if you have any questions about your own specific requirements, please contact me and we'll work through it to see if you're eligible or not. Simultaneously, you can't be a graduate student, a research fellow, or hold any other training award, or be employed by a for-profit business related to the proposed research. Pretty straightforward. We just need to make sure that you are an independent researcher and that you're holding the position at an MOU. Unfortunately, graduate students and research fellows are not eligible for this grant. And the other thing too is you can't have been a principal applicant on a previously funded establishment grant. So if you've already gotten one, congratulations, can't do it again. So something else that we've updated when we are working through the funding guide and the RMS is how we talk about your co-applicants. So we have what's called project roles. Oh, Cameron Mang has a question. Is the 5-year eligibility requirements adjusted for COVID delays or other career interruptions? We haven't done the same thing. I think that's kind of related to what CIHR is looking at. We're just going with 5 years, but if you do have any career interruptions, we can discuss those. We haven't done anything with COVID specific yet, but if there was, if you took any leaves, anything like that, the usual regular components, those are all considered when we discuss your eligibility requirements. So yeah, send me an email if there is anything that you'd like to talk about specifically regarding yours, if you had maybe a maternity or paternity leave or a health, anything like that, and we can discuss it. And we can look at COVID as well, but that just isn't something we've discussed internally yet. No problem. All right, so the project role considerations. We now have 3 project role types on our grants. There's the applicant investigator. So they're designated as principal applicant, co-principal applicants, and co-applicants based on the level of leadership, responsibility, and involvement. Individuals in these roles, you'll be able to then have kind of a sub role, which is either you're a researcher, a knowledge user, or a person with lived experience. Please note though, for this program, the co-principal applicant is not an eligible role. So if you are inviting people to your grant, you won't invite them as a co-principal. They can only be invited as a co-applicant. Things that need to happen with people in this role is they must complete a contribution form on the application. This is a new requirement for all of our grants. So instead of being able to, before you would have to do kind of a 2-page team requirement, and then you as principal applicant, you would be adding in all the CVs and everything. Now what'll happen is when you send this invitation to a co-applicant, they will have to go into the RMS and complete a contribution form. I see questions and I'll answer those after this. The applicant investigator will need to provide information about relevant experience and expertise. We do have a lovely table in the funding guide that gives you those specific requirements based on the role. So if you were a researcher, you would be giving a Canadian CV. If you're a knowledge user, we have a modified CV template, and then a person with lived experience would have a testimonial, and you can now do that either in written form, or if it's easier for your person with lived experience to do a recording, we do allow media uploads. Gurpreet, how about if you can send me an email specifically about your question, we'll answer that just because it is very individual. And then Colin, is there any ability to submit one application as 2 co-PIs? Unfortunately, no, there has to be only one. It's a principal applicant, and then everyone else is co-applicants. This is focused on an individual grant. So yeah, no co-PIs. And then finally, for the applicant investigator, I forgot to mention, you're not compensated from the grant except for patient honoraria. So this usually comes up if there is a trainee that's interested in being on the grant. They would need to decide whether they work on, if they're going to be working and getting paid, then they'll be in a different role. But if they'd like to be named on the grant as a co-applicant, then they wouldn't be compensated. So the next project role consideration is the personnel. What we've done after hearing feedback is that sometimes individuals would like to, if they already know that they're who their trainees are, they would like to have them listed on the grant. So these individuals are tasked to carry out aspects of the research project and are compensated from the grant funds. They'll still complete a contribution form, but it's going to have different information requested on there, such as describing their research career development in relation to the project, just so we can get a bit of an idea of what they'll benefit from. And they're compensated from the grant. But as I said just previously, they aren't named on the grant as a co-applicant. Oh, sorry, I had missed the supporters. And then the final role is supporters, which we used to call collaborators. These are individuals or organizations who provide a specific service in a limited and defined role in the proposed activities. They have an interest in the research outcomes, or they represent private industry. So you would need to make sure that you have an individual listed on the grant, but they could be representing a full organization. They also complete a contribution form, but on their form, it's pretty straightforward. They just need to upload a letter of support. They do have the possibility to be compensated from the grant, but we do have specific rules, especially when it comes to industry, and that's found in the funding guide. And as I just said, they would provide a letter of support where they're identifying the specific supports or their interest in the research outcomes. So those are the 3 project roles we now have on grants. On top of that, you do need to have a dean or department head letter of support. This is a jointly signed letter from the department head and or dean, depending, or their delegates. It really depends what your college or your institution structure looks like. And what they're doing is agreeing to the proposed activities in the application and just showing that support for your research career. So the letter should indicate, and this is all listed in the guide, the research environment, so including supports such as, is there any mentorship going on for you, infrastructure such as space, equipment, and startup funds. Will you get any teaching reductions during your first maybe 1 or 2 years? And what does it look like when it comes to any administrative responsibilities you have? They then will identify the support for proposed activities in the application and confirmation of sufficient protected research time to complete the proposed activities in that given time frame. They should indicate the nature and extent, so those hours and days of non-research activities. So that does include the teaching, administration, or if you have any clinical hours, that should all be in this letter. As previously discussed, if you don't have an appointment at the time of application, so by March 11th, they would need to provide the start date confirmation. So that would be in effect by October 1st of the application year. So by that last funding date, start date. And if you are in a term position, you are eligible, but we would need information regarding that term position and the process to permanent, because the purpose of this grant is to help you establish your independent career, autonomous career here in the province. We do just want to see if there's a process moving you forward into those next steps to become permanent. So, and I do suggest with your dean letter that you get a head start on that as well. Sometimes they might take a while, just if they have to kind of gather all of that information. So start having those discussions as soon as you can. Doesn't matter. Sorry, I'm just reading another question. Yeah, it's more of just like a matter of fact, or if it's it's more of a reference letter in the sense of what's going to happen is when the peer reviewers look at it, they're going to see, okay, this individual does have certain supports in there. If you can hammer out any like specifics, that's good to do, so that they know, like, say if you're a bench scientist, you do have a lab, you'll have the space and capacity in order to do that research. It's just so that we know, and so that the reviewers know as they're looking through, that you can do the work, because they'll be looking at that, and you're also supported by your institution, college, department, wherever you're situated. So the more detailed it can be, the better, but whatever you can get, just try to work with your dean or your department head as much as you can. I hope that's clear, Cameron. So I'm going to move in. Perfect. So I'll move into allowable expenses. There's 2 slides for this one. We just want to be clear there. And as I said, with the funding guide, there's also more information now when it comes to allowable expenses in general for SHRF. So the expenses are those that are necessary to carry out proposed activities, and they're not provided through other means. So this means you should include in-kind and other sources of funding required to complete the proposed research in the budget and justification. Once you get into the full application, you will see that for the budget, there are 3 components in the Excel that you'll fill out. There is the budget where it will identify everything when it comes to the dollars requested to SHRF. So if you're asking for up to 120,000, that budget will list all of that. Then there'll be another sheet where you can identify if you had any other sources that are also supporting the research or any in-kind. Maybe you'll be able to use equipment within the department from another researcher, that sort of thing you would list there. And then there is also a third one where it just discusses other contributions as well. You'll want to make sure that it allows for, we do allow for equipment purchases, but it must be justified in relation to the availability of equivalent equipment for the proposed research and benefit. And it will benefit your long-term research program in Saskatchewan. So it just needs to directly tie into what you're doing. You may have big ideas and big dreams, which is good. And there might be a cool piece of equipment that you wish to have, but it doesn't really relate to what you're trying to do. So that would be something you wouldn't ask for. But if you did need something very specific in order to get your work done, you can request that. You'll just need to justify it in your budget so that the peer reviewers aren't questioning why it's in there. It doesn't provide funding for costs explicitly associated with preparing future grant applications. Just want to put that in there so you guys are aware when you put that in your, don't put that in your budget. As we said, industry supporters are welcome on these grants. We're glad to see that people are starting to go in different avenues and work different ways. But with that, they're to provide cash or in-kind contributions in an amount equal or greater than 50% of any reimbursement received from the grant for goods and services. So we just want to see if they are interested in what you're doing and have kind of a bit of a buy-in to the work that's being done. So they may be offering to do a service for you, and it's just working with them to see if there's a way that they can then provide that 50% or more of in-kind or cash, and then you can still pay them, reimburse them from the grant. And we can discuss that further, just what that looks like. This is something new, and what we saw in the solutions program, there's a couple different scenarios, which is awesome and good. So we can talk through that. We do permit release time allowance for knowledge users so that they can participate in specific activities that are directly related to the proposed research. There isn't time release when it comes to yourself as the principal applicant. This is purely just for knowledge users. An example would be if you had a nurse that would be doing some work for you and they needed some release time in order to do the work during their work hours. That's where you could put this in the grant. Budget or in-kind resources should be shown to support sharing knowledge gained with stakeholders and or target audiences outside the academic community. Something that we used to have in this grant was a maximum limit when it came to specific KT. Now what we just want to see, because everything's a little bit different and people do things differently, is, and the reviewers will want to see, is that you do have budget set aside for some KT activities with individuals outside of the academic community. When it does come to academic focused knowledge sharing, there is a limit of 10% of the budget requested to SHRF. We, again, a bit of a change. Instead of giving it a dollar amount, we're giving it a percentage of amount. So then that gives you a bit of flexibility. If you're asking for the full 120, you can do 10% of that as academic focused KT. And then finally, costs associated with building external relationships, so outside of the institution, to benefit the proposed program of research are eligible where appropriate, and they are clearly justified in the research proposal. So that's everything when it comes to eligibility. A lot of information just got thrown at you. And this is, like I said, all in the guide, so you can read that over there as well. So when it comes to the application process, it's a two-step process. First is our eligibility check. And the purpose for that, we've implemented it probably, I feel like it was 3 years ago, is to make sure that you are submitting to the appropriate funding opportunity. We don't want you to go through all of the work of the application and then you find out you weren't eligible. So that's why we also check your applicant eligibility. It's a quick, easy way for you to do this without, like I said, doing the full application. It helps us on our end to start facilitating the creation of the review committees so that we can find appropriate reviewers with expertise for the proposed projects. And we can start doing that early so that we make sure we have the right people on the committee. It'll inform our partners of interest regarding partner funding. So if we see that we have a couple of individuals that are looking at dementia, we would probably reach out to Alzheimer's Society of Saskatchewan and see if they would be interested in partnering on the grants. And then what that does is it expands our envelope, which means that we can hopefully then expand our success rate and funding more grants. And then finally, it just formalizes this process of eligibility because everything is written down and put into a form. We now give you a back and forth information too. Instead of it going through email or phone call discussions, it's all within this eligibility form, and then we can look back on that and make sure everyone has the correct information. So the process, pretty straightforward. It's reviewed internally by myself because it's mostly just making sure that you've got all the check marks. And then it's a rolling intake. So like I said, you could start that right now. You could submit it to me by the end of the week if you know it. If you have a general idea of what you're doing and you have the general information about your eligibility, but you have up until January 21st to submit your eligibility. And then, as I said, if there's any revisions, that has to be done by January 29th. But again, if you do it earlier, we can have a bit more of a back and forth process, but the final decisions have to happen January 29th. So after the eligibility process is the application process, you would move straight into the full application. All information is in our application. That's where you'll go to apply and put all of your information in. You'll make sure you submit by that deadline of March 11th. We don't accept late applications. So like I said, write it down, star it, put as many notifications as you need to. And then what'll happen is that application will go to our peer review committees. We have two committees for this. We usually do a biomedical committee, and then we do a socio-health clinical committee. And we put the applications in one of those two based on the information received. And what the reviewers are looking at, and we have the full information in the guide, but these are just the top, like the high level of the three criterias, is they're looking at your track record, and that's 45%. So that's the scientific productivity, the originality and impact that's to be considered in the context of the research area and the applicant's experience. The applicant should be building a reputation for excellence in their fields and demonstrating exceptional promise for future health research provincially and nationally. So what the reviewers are looking for is if you're going in an upward trajectory. And then with the program of research at 40%, the application should demonstrate the integration of one or more projects within the overall proposed program of research that should be feasible within the proposed timeline. So what they're looking at there with the program of research is it feasible? Can it be done? Are your methods correct? Everything like that. And then finally, we look at the impact, which is 15%. And that is that the applicant should be addressing the potential impacts of the proposed program of research, addressing the Canadian Academy of Health Science, so CAS impact categories as relevant. They have capacity building, advancing knowledge, informing decision-making, and the broad health, social, or economic impacts. Just looking at Jennifer's. Yeah, so with the track record, the reason we have it at that level is because with what's going on with the 5 years, and if you're comparing someone in their first year and someone in your 5th year, and we do have information like sub criteria underneath this. I was just trying to not have so much wording, even though I probably failed at that. There's still a lot on here. But what we're looking at is having the reviewers look at if someone is their track record, they're looking at their CV, they're in their first year of their position, but they're seeing that they had a strong PhD, maybe they had a fellowship, and that they're moving upward. And then they're going to look at the same thing when it comes to someone who might be in the 5th year of their career, early career, and where they're at. Are they going in that same trajectory, or have we seen that maybe they tapered off on their 3rd year? And reviewers do consider, that was a question earlier, they do consider if there was any kind of leaves during that and that might have stalled your career. They take that all into consideration. So that's what we try to do so that we're not, so that everyone gets a fair chance, whether your 1st year, 3rd year, 5th year. And because the reason that's also higher is that this is an establishment grant, so it's focusing more on the individual, whereas some of our team grants obviously focus more on the project. So I hope that explains it a bit. So that's kind of it for everything. I'm just going to give you a few tips. Make sure you read that application package and the SHRF funding guide. Those are very important. They have a lot of information for you. If you ask questions, I'll probably reference part of that and then go into a bit more of detail, but it's always good to check those out. Make sure when you're writing your application that you're grabbing the reviewer's interest. I think this is pretty straightforward. Show them, we know you're excited about the grant, but you got to show the reviewer why you're excited and why this grant is going to help you moving forward in your career. And that's where it moves into that make your case. So explain to them that with the establishment grant, I'll be able to do this, this, and this by starting here. Do detail the how you're going to do it. Questions that I've seen in reviews is like, well, how did they get there? Sometimes it may be very clear to you because you're so into it, but then maybe give it to someone who isn't in your research area and see if they have questions about, well, how did you get from A to B? Sometimes we miss that when we're writing our applications. And another thing too is address if there's any potential bumps while you're working from A to B. That's another thing that reviewers will see is like, it may look great, you may have this awesome idea, but did you identify what happens if you hit a roadblock or if something doesn't work out? Have you thought it through is what they want to see. Make it easy to read. Like I said, we have the 2 committees, but within there, obviously it's still we need to have a multidisciplinary committee. So if you are cancer focused, we will make sure that we try to get cancer reviewers, but there may also be someone else who isn't in a specific area as you are that's reading it. So make sure that you give them information that makes it easy to read and isn't super dense. Another important thing is just formatting. Make sure that you're checking your grammar, your spelling. We all know how we feel when we read something, and the odd spelling mistake is fine because there's a lot that you're doing, but the cleaner it is and the easier it is to read is very helpful for the reviewer, and then in turn is very helpful for you. Check your math. Make sure that what you've written in your budget justification actually does reflect what's going on in your budget. Sometimes we work back and forth on those components, and what happens is we don't double check it. You might have updated your budget 5 times, but you forgot to update your budget justification. And then the reviewers start to question why isn't something adding up or which is the real information. So just don't let them question it. So the field test your application is, like I said, go and have someone else read it, have someone get an idea. Does it make sense? Can they may not understand exactly what the method is or how it works, but can they get enough out of it that they know what you're trying to do and how to do it? And then go back to the application package and make sure that you've got everything you need, because there are a couple of different things for this grant when it comes to the requirements. All right, so that's it. We can keep doing questions. If you do have specific questions about eligibility application process, you can contact me. My email is right here. This is probably the best way to get a hold of me. And if we do need to have a further discussion and it's easier by phone, I will set up a Teams meeting with you or any other type of virtual meeting. If you're having any issues with the RMS specifically, I would suggest contacting Tanya. She's our programs and peer review coordinator. She's awesome. She knows that system inside out. And again, just send her an email and then she'll identify if it's a quick response back or if she needs to connect with you in some sort of virtual way. So yeah, I'll stay on for a bit and answer any questions. No, Gavin, you didn't miss it. We didn't put that up this time. We're still hoping for about 10 grants. We just decided that sometimes we do get more funding or something comes up so we can fund more. But we're hoping that we'd be able to fund our usual minimum of 10 grants this year. And I'm not seeing any more questions. So again, please just email if you have anything comes up later on. You'll receive this recording and slides hopefully by the end of this week. And best of luck with your applications. Have a great day, you guys.